You guys, what is up? Bringing you a new podcast today. Today, I will be doing a JJNH hockey podcast, or JJNH podcast. A solo edition. Again, Josiah is not able to record at this moment. Therefore, I wanted to get a podcast out, so I decided I'd just record myself. So we're at the halfway point of the year, so we're going to be talking trade deadline targets, we're going to be talking Erik Karlsson, we're going to be talking Buffalo Sabres. So lots of stuff going on in the NHL right now, so let's get right into it. First off, we're at the halfway point, so I'm going to be going into who I think will win the Stanley Cup. It's always the ultimate question every year, which obviously makes complete sense. I personally think I'm feeling Carolina. I don't know. Colorado, yes. I think Colorado's up there. Tampa, and Vegas. You could definitely make an easy argument for that as well. But I'm feeling Carolina this year. I don't know. Something in the air, but like in my latest rankings video, the Hurricanes were tops in the league in terms of percentage and in wins as well when I reorganized that later. Now I reorganized it today and the Knights are actually first on the list, but the Canes are still second. I don't know. I'm feeling the Canes this year. Like, they got a fantastic defense. Jacob Slavin, Brent Pesce there on D. Offense, Aho, Teravainen, Svechnikov's one of the best top lines in the league. Jordan Staal there, so you got some leadership and checking ability. Goaltending, that's kind of a question, but like their goaltending always seems to get it done when they need it. And Peter Mrazek isn't even healthy. They don't even have him in the lineup right now, and yet the Canes are one of the best teams in the league. That's great. So like their team looks so good. They have such good stats. Like they're like Rod Brindamore's such a good coach for them, and he's got that respect in that room. As well as being one of the best Hurricane players ever. So, you got all the tools. Now it's just, like, the only question I really do believe that they have is goaltending. Like, can the goaltending get it done when they're going to need it most in the playoffs? That is the question. I do think they can, though, because the Canes had long runs before. Like, in 2019, they got to the conference finals, but got swept by the Bruins. For example. And then last year they dominated the Rangers in the play-in round, but then lost in the first round last year. So they have that playoff experience, you know, like every Stanley Cup winning team has to have kind of an oomph moment when they get like wrecked in the playoffs and they realize what it truly takes to win. Lightning. Look at the Lightning. So the year before they won the Cup last year, they lost in the first round to the Blue Jackets. In fact, got swept. The Jackets were, on paper, the worst team that got into the playoffs, and they still destroyed the Lightning. So, the Lightning learned from that. They acquired guys like Blake Coleman and brought Patrick Maroon in, like guys like that. Guys like a Crash and Bane. And those kind of guys are the ones that produce for you in the playoffs. Blake Coleman, for example, was a fantastic pickup last year. He was so important to the team last year when they won the championship. So it's like guys like that, you know, every cup-winning team has to have that oomph moment when they just get absolutely wrecked. And the Hurricanes had that, I feel like, with the Bruins a couple of years ago when they got swept. And the Bruins lost in 7 games in the Cup final. But still, like, I just feel like that loss, and then last year's loss, maybe that's their oomph moment too. I feel like last year's loss in the first round to Washington, I believe. I think all that kind of has made them learn some stuff. And then they got all the talent, and they got all the skill, and they got the coaching that they need. On to, also, one thing I did want to mention, though, if you're arguing the Lightning case, is that last time a team had a 62-win season and then lost, it was the Red Wings in the 90s. They lost in the first round, and then they won back-to-back cups after that. Lightning won 62 games, then got destroyed by Columbus, won last year. So they're following that pattern. They could easily win the Cup again. And then also addressing Vegas. Mark Stone, hot take here, might be the best player in the league right now. I'm not joking. And it's crazy to think about Mark Stone. Like, really? Like, not that Mark Stone isn't a fantastic player, but Mark Stone? But it's something that I'll address later on. But, you know, they got tons of talent. I feel like they could use one more piece at forward. Like, there aren't too many forwards on the market, especially, like, star ones. So they'd have to do some searching, because they need a star player. They don't really need, like, a Kyle Palmary, someone that I'll address later on. Like, they have tons of guys a lot like Kyle Palmary, and they've tried to acquire, like, you know, a star before. Stone's been a success, and technically speaking, he is their offensive star, and he has worked out for sure. But I feel like they need another one, because Patches is not quite there. And I feel like they also need a center. So their offense is kind of what makes me hesitant. But other than that, they're always greater than what looks like the sum of their parts, starting from their very existence in 2018. So, you know, you can never fully count Vegas out. Fleury's playing absolutely amazing in net for them right now, like Vezina candidate. I see no reason why they couldn't win a cup with Vegas, especially since in the playoffs, Lehner would probably be back by then. So you could play Fleury, and then if he falters, you put in Lehner. So, or vice versa, if Vegas wanted to do that. And they're solidly coached. They got Peter DeBoer, what am I saying? So, yeah, they got a coach with experience there. I just feel like these three teams are the class of the league right now. Colorado is playing better, and they're always ravaged by injuries, so you never get to see them at their full potential, which is kind of annoying. But if they can bring it together in time for the playoffs, I see no reason why they can go far. So, my predictions right now, the ideal conference, the conference finals I want to see Tampa and Carolina face each other in the conference finals. Because you got the league's best offense, arguably, Lightning, like at least top 3. And then you got the Canes defense, which is at least top 3. For me, they're the best defense in the league. But for other people, they might be a bit lower, so it's like top 3. So I'd love to see that Lightning offense go against the Canes defense. I feel like that'd be interesting. And then just like, you know, the Lightning might win. Like if the Lightning had to get in a head-to-head matchup with the Canes, I just feel like the Canes' goaltending problems might kind of spell the end of that for them. But, you know, I feel like it'd be a good series. And then a Vegas-Colorado series, that would be so fun to watch. I mean, if Colorado was healthy. Like, both teams have got solid goaltending. Grubauer in net for Colorado has finally started to show his true potential. And then Fleury in net for Vegas, as I talked about earlier, has done absolutely amazing. And then both teams have a solid defense, fantastic offense. Like, I feel like those would be a couple good series. So, my final pick right as of now, the Carolina Hurricanes. Next, I want to talk about Erik Karlsson. So, he made some interesting remarks, to say the least. He said something along the lines of, trying to remember it off the top of my head. He said that he obviously didn't sign up to go to San Jose to go through what he did for his first 10 years in Ottawa. Or, well, he spent 9 years there, so his entire tenure in Ottawa. But, you know, he just felt like they needed to get the team under control. And I was reading an article about it on the Hockey News by Ken Campbell. They also run a podcast, too, that I listen to. And he made a great point, in my mind. If Erik Karlsson doesn't want, like, he didn't sign up for San Jose to play the way that they have. Well, San Jose didn't sign up for Erik Karlsson to play the way he has. He's not done well as a Shark overall. Like, he's a shell of his former self. Yeah, you can easily point that to injuries. Sure, and that made sense. Like, it's not entirely his fault, but you don't go around blaming other people in the organization besides yourself. Like, there kind of seems to be a lack of self-responsibility here, despite the fact that he's injured. Yeah, but guys are injured all the time. But like, what's crazy is that Carlson's not that old. He's a day older than Roman Josi and 6 months older than Victor Hedman. Hedman and Josi are two of the top blue liners in the NHL. Josi won the Norris last year, and Hedman's almost a shoo-in to win it this year. So, at that age, there's not a reason why Carlson should be declining this early. It's like, yeah, again, injuries. And injuries have played a massive factor, I'm sure. And then one more thing I wanted to mention, too. I don't want to sound like I'm hating on him, because he was just responding to a question, and he was like reiterating the sentiment expressed by Doug Wilson, the Sharks GM, earlier. But I feel like the Sharks are just at a point right now where they need to start rebuilding, but they're at the I like to call it the Detroit phase, where they're in denial about them being in a rebuild. Like, remember Detroit when they had Ken Holland as GM, and Holland and Wilson in so many ways I feel like are similar. They're willing to make big trades. They refuse to rebuild teams. Like, absolutely refuse. Like, Holland was just going to do a rebuild, I believe, when he quit, or he was fired. I can't remember. And I feel like Wilson's kind of at that point. Both of them are long-tenured guys that refuse to rebuild, constantly in denial. Like, the Wings just didn't want to give up that playoff streak, so they continued to sign and trade for overpriced veterans. Look at Franz Nielsen, Darren Helm, Justin Applicator. And finally, when they admitted that they needed a rebuild and they started getting high picks and everything, they were actually good, because when you're at the stage that Wilson and the Sharks are at right now, it's the worst stage. It's called the mushy middle. Essentially, you're like between maybe 17th, 18th to 21st in the league, where it's like, you're not a terrible team. Like, Sharks are not a terrible team by any stretch of the imagination. They got Carlson, they got Burns, they got Hurdle, they got LeBanc, they got Meyer, they got Couture. So they got good players, like aging players, but good players. So they're not like the worst team in the league or anything. I don't think they're in competition with that, with the Sabres, who I'll talk about later. So what's the problem then? Well, the mushy middle then is you're not good, because they're not a good team either. They're not a good team. So you're not going to make the playoffs. You're just going to miss. And that's the worst place, because you just miss the playoffs. You don't have a chance to win the cup. Or even worse, you make the first round and then you get swept or easily destroyed, because you're just not a good team. So you either make the playoffs, easily go out, or you just miss. And either of them's bad, because you don't get a chance to get a good draft pick, if you even have your draft pick. So you're getting not great draft picks, so it's harder to draft elite guys, and you're not having playoff success. It's like the worst place a team can possibly be. You either want to be bottoming out or an elite team. You want to be one of those two teams at the stage. Like, you always want to be an elite team, but the worst comes to worst, you're bottoming out, right? But the Sharks are just in denial about that. Like, Wilson keeps saying he refuses to rebuild, and he doesn't want to rebuild because he feels he owes it to the players. Yeah, okay, but it's not doing his job any favors. Like, I would not be shocked if the Sharks felt like they had to fire him at some point, because this team needs to rebuild. It does. It's time for a rebuild. It's time to figure out what to do with Hurdle and Couture. Keep Meyer, because Meyer's young enough. LeBanc is only 26. You could keep him too. And I guess you could keep Hurdle as well. But, like, you gotta be looking at what to do if you can do anything with Vlasic, Burns, Carlson, and Couture. Couture's your captain. But it's like, I know I'm kind of rambling on here, but the Sharks need to just figure out what they want to do, who they want to be. It's like when you ask like a 15-year-old, like, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you got to figure it out. Like, that's what the Sharks need to do. They don't know what their identity is anymore. It's not a contender. They're not known for their elite defense that they were when Carlson was acquired. because Carlson's not that good anymore. Burns is not as good as he used to be, and Vlasic's a shell of his former self. So, but anyway, so the Sharks need to find out what to do. I think they should rebuild, but Wilson seems to think otherwise. Back to the Carlson comments. I just feel like, was it necessary? Not to mention, was it necessary to take a shot at Ottawa? Like he said, he spent 10 years in Ottawa rebuilding. Well, that was his entire tenure. He actually spent 9 years there, as I mentioned earlier. So, was that a shot then? Like, was he complaining about his entire experience in Ottawa? Like, did he forget about the 2017 Miracle run where they almost made it to the Cup Finals? Almost took out the defending Cup champions and the team that won the Cup that year? Did he forget about all that? Like, I just wonder if it was a necessary comment, especially since those fans in Ottawa were so loyal to him. They just loved him so much. They, like, he was their captain for a reason. Like, you know, you would think that he would have enjoyed it in Ottawa, except for the lack of playoff success, mostly. Like, when he left, it was time to leave, because Ottawa was an absolute tire fire, and they're not that much better now. But at least right now, they have a future, right? So, I just feel like it wasn't necessary to take those shots at his former team. No, I don't think it was. I don't think he had to put it the way he did. It was just, it's so unnecessary. Even though he was asked the question, it just feels unnecessary and kind of whiny. Like, oh, I don't want to go through a rebuild again. Yeah, well, you had to have looked at it like, you're smart enough guy. You should have, like, been able to figure out, looking at the Sharks roster, that it wasn't that good when you signed an 8-year, $11.5 million deal. Like, the Sharks did not sign up for what he's been producing. And then they made the bad deal of signing him to the contract that they gave him. Like, just so many things wrong with this fractured relationship. And I was watching a video earlier about this ridiculous proposal, supposed proposal, that the Sharks would have had to give up, with comparison to the package that the Sharks gave up, which was Josh Norris, Rudolph Balchers, like a bunch of picks, first, seconds, and a third, I think. Chris Tierney was in on that, and Dylan DeMello. So the comparison to that, according to this Sportsnet guy named Dave, who he's not there anymore, but at the time he was, and he ran a poll saying that the Canucks equivalent at the time would have been Ben Hutton, because Hutton was coming off a 6-point year, like he was bad in 2017-18. Brandon Sutter, who was a year removed from a 17-goal, 36-point, or 34-point season. Elias Pettersson, who was the main point, and Jonathan Dallin. And Jonathan Dallin at the time, like, we were super hyped on him. He was supposed to be, like, Petey's line mate. They were going to be the second coming to the Sedins and everything. Then he kind of fell off, and then eventually he was traded to the Sharks. And then the equivalent of the picks. And the poll at the time said 95.5% no, which 100% that's not what we would have wanted to give up. I wouldn't give up Pettersson by himself, let alone the rest of the package. Not to mention the picks would have been a lot better. Like, I don't remember exactly what years or what they would have ended up being, so I can't say what the picks ended up being. But I can say Ottawa's, like, just won this deal. Like, they got Tim Stützle and Josh Norris out of it, because Stützle was one of the picks that San Jose gave them. And both of them are doing quite well. But anyway, I just thought I would mention that. Next we're going to talk about is the Buffalo Sabres. The Buffalo Sabres are, how do I put this, a tire fire. So news just released today. Ralph Kruegers has been fired. Thank goodness. Like, not a great hire. Like, it started off all right, and you can see why Buffalo would have hired him. He was he was brought into the 2016 World Cup of Hockey. He ran Team Europe, and Team Europe went all the way to the finals and actually had a lead on Canada until Brad Marchand finished it late. So, Team Europe was the only team that came anywhere close to beating Canada that tournament. They destroyed the Americans, and they went all the way to the finals. So, you can see why, like, in a short time span like that, Kruger was so successful with a team that looked like it was going to be, like, a bottom feeder in that tournament. So you can see why Krueger had the credibility, even though he's more of a soccer guy. So, but the Sharks took a chance. I kind of liked it when they hired him. I thought, why not give it a shot? He worked out for Team Europe. Why couldn't it work out here? Well, it didn't work out here. Eichel seems to have this thing where every new coach that comes in tries to connect with him. Eichel praises the coach, They seem to have a good relationship, and then just something happens. And that's what happened here. Krueger contacted Eichel, a day or two after he was hired. They talked. Eichel liked him, They had a good relationship. And then something happened, and then Krueger was telling the media about Eichel's injury. Eichel said that Krueger was lying. It was actually this. And that really fractured it, and I think that really lowered the morale in the Sharks dressing room. Maybe not having Krueger there is a good idea. I don't see why it wouldn't be a good idea. It could end up being a good idea, to have him fired. It just seems the relationship just seems to be so fractured, and the team is on an 11-game losing streak. It's not playing like they really care about having the coach. The way they're playing, especially in their 6-0 loss to the Capitals a few days ago, they're playing like they want their coach, that they wanted their coach fired. And, well, mission success. He's fired. But let's look at the team then, because I've been wanting to make a video on this for a while, and I figured, I'd include it in the podcast today because, Krueger just got fired and stuff. What do the Sharks do? What do the Sabres do? Well, first thing, obviously, hire a new coach. But I don't know, who should they hire? Because I feel like they need a Stanley Cup coach that can put a spark in that team. They can't hire a nice guy. They need a completely fresh face, but a guy that has had experience. If Daryl Sutter was still on the market, I'd say he was ideal. Because look at how well he's done with the Flames, in the short term. I don't believe the Flames have lost a game since he was hired. So that's five games in a row or something. So he's lit a spark under the Flames. So I feel like he'd be so good under the Buffalo bench, at least in the short term. Just to put a spark underneath that team. But do the Sabres even want to put a spark under this team? It kind of seems they're tanking. Owen Power's the first overall pick this year, or the supposed anyway. He's legit. He's legit. So, Power and Dahlin would be insane in the future. So, are the Sabres tanking? To me, it doesn't make sense to tank because I feel like the NHL has really curbed that. Being able to tank. Look at the Red Wings. They're whining and complaining that the lottery needs to be changed because they've gotten screwed over in a couple drafts. Even though they've drafted well, the 6th overall pick where they dropped turned into Moritz Seider. He seems to be doing all right. Then the 4th pick from this year is Lucas Raymond. He seems to be doing all right. So it's not like the Wings have drafted bad. So what, are you saying that you regret drafting those guys? Why are you complaining about something where, in the end, it still ends up being a success to you? It just doesn't make sense for me. But the Sabres, I don't know. I feel like they kind of need a jolt like the Flames have gotten this season and the Panthers have gotten this season from Joel Quenneville. I feel like that's what they want because the Panthers were not quite on the same levels as the Sabres, but a tier above. Really struggling just to make the playoffs. Just something wrong, something fractured about the team. Even though it looks like they should be a good team, they were having issues. They hired Quenneville. And you can't say it's because they signed Sergei Bobrovsky in free agency. That's been a fail. But I feel like Quenneville lit a spark on that team, and now the Panthers are a top 5 team in the NHL. I checked the standings yesterday. Panthers were first. It's absolutely amazing. So, if you're the Sabres, I don't know if you looked for that this year. Maybe you just have your assistant coach, you promote him to the bench this year. You finish out the year. Especially if you're trying to tank, you get the high draft pick, whatever it is, and then you draft. And then after the draft's over, I feel like you hire a coach that can light a spark under this team. You need someone that's not a nice guy. You need someone that can rule this team with an iron fist, that doesn't let the team give up. That's who you need, and I just can't think of anyone that can do that for them. Like, I feel like the two best options, Quenneville and Sutter, are off the market now. Like, and then there's the factor that the coach might not want to go to Buffalo. Like, if I'm a coach, unless I have no other job opportunities, I'm not going to Buffalo. Why would I go to Buffalo? You know, like, this is a team that the team just keeps throwing out coaches like they're out of style. And never seems to be happy with any one coach. And every single time the team struggles, it throws the coach under the bus. Like, why would you want to join a team like that? Like, a lot of other teams do that too, but a lot of the other teams are trying to have success. And the Sabres just don't seem to be trying quite as hard. I don't know. That's just my opinion. But the next thing to fix is the fracture in that lineup. This entire team needs to be built from the ground up. If I'm in charge, I'm firing basically anyone that's been involved in building this team, and I'm completely rehiring a new entire staff, fresh faces to bring into that room. And I'm shopping Jack Eichel quietly to see what I can get for him. And if I like what I see, he's gone. He's it's nothing against Eichel, but he's obviously unhappy here, and he's not going to lead the Sabres to the promised land by himself. He hasn't even been able to get them in the playoffs. No disrespect to Eichel, no one can do that. McDavid couldn't do it with Edmonton. So if that's me, I'm getting rid of Taylor Hall too. Like, he's gone, and I'm not re-signing him under any circumstances. So I'm getting rid of Hall. I'm shopping Eichel. I'm getting rid of the entire staff involved in the making of this team and just redoing it. Like, I'm rebuilding this team from the ground up because you need to fix that fracture, and it starts with the foundation. You know, like, you need to build a new foundation for this team. You need a fresh face. I feel like you fire the GM. I don't know. Like, you need an entire new staff, and rebuilding that foundation is how it starts, in my opinion. I think that's how you fix it. You need to, this can start in the summer. Like, it doesn't have to start right now. I feel like right now you just promote a temporary coach, and then you just live with the rest of this heck season. And then that's it. You're done, right? Alright, last topic of the day. Today, I will be addressing some trade deadline guys. First guy I'm going to mention, Matthias Eckham. So, it's interesting because a few years ago, we had the kingmakers of the trade deadline. So, that was Ottawa at the time, you know? Like, they were bad, but they had some really good pieces. Carlson and Stone were the main ones. But then they also had, Duchesne, too, right? So, they were the kingmakers because they had a bunch of good players up for sale. That's the Preds this year. Like, almost their entire D has to be up for grabs. Like, at least half of it. I feel like Ekholm, possibly Ellis, could be on the market. Fabro, I feel like Fabro has to be, has to be up there. I feel like the Preds would be willing to talk about Fabro. And then the offense, too. Forsberg, they would be willing to talk about Forsberg. Arvidsson's a great player, so I don't see any reason why they wouldn't take advantage of that. They just have so many pieces that they could give up. But the first and foremost guy I wanted to mention is Matthias Eckham. So this guy's a fantastic D-man. Like, if I'm running over backwards trying to get this guy. If I'm the Jets general manager, Kevin Sheldayoff, sorry if I said that incorrectly. I'm kicking and screaming. I'm tripping. I'm doing whatever I can to get this guy. He's the exact guy the Jets need to a T. He's relatively cheap, like a fair price. He's a defensive defenseman above all, which is fine because with that Jets offense, they don't need many offensive D-men. And he can carry a lot of your ice time. Like, he can take a load off Josh Morrissey and a bunch of other D-men and spread out that lineup. He's the exact guy you need. And they want a Jake Muzzin package, which is if you remember when the Leafs acquired Jake Muzzin, it was a first-round pick and a couple prospects, which was most notably Carl Grundstrom at the time. So I feel like the Leafs had done all right with that trade. Why wouldn't the Jets be willing to give up Logan Stanley, a first-round pick, and another prospect for Ekholm? Like, possibly more. Because, like, if I'm the national general manager, I'm not taking Logan Stanley, a first-round pick, and another prospect for this guy. He's too good. So it's like, you know, the Jets do, like, a first-second Logan Stanley or something. Like, you know, you can give up one of your D prospects that aren't doing as well, like Logan Stanley, who's been struggling a bit. Or you can give up one of your more expendable forwards, like Andrew Kopp, maybe. I feel like if Jack Roslovic was still here, he'd be like the ideal guy. We'd be talking about him. But he's not. He's on Columbus now and doing quite well, I might add. So that's my offer for him. 100%, it's a fail on Kevin Sheldayoff's part if he doesn't try to get this guy, and I'm sure he is. Next guy I want to talk about is Kyle Palmary. So Kyle Palmary, 20-goal scorer, plays for the Devils. Just a good player, a team that could use some depth on offense is going to be, like, second-line right winger. That he can play that easy. And he's incredibly consistent and reliable. He's not very injury-prone either, which is really nice. Like, I don't know. There's so many teams, I think, that would want to get this guy. I can't even really count them. Like, you can start off with maybe the Oilers, because they definitely need some depth on offense. And they have a good prospect pool. Like, they have a couple decent goalies, for example. They could kind of dangle there, throwing a pick to the Devils. And that might be enough to get Palmary, especially since I believe he's on an expiring deal. And so I feel like the Oilers would be a solid fit. Like, yeah, 2 weeks quarantine and stuff. But you want this guy for the playoffs because both the Oilers and the Jets in the Ekholm trade are, like, they're going to make the playoffs. It's almost guaranteed at this point, especially in the North Division. So, that, like, you can afford 2-week quarantine when your team's going to be, like, ready for the playoffs because that's when you want Ekholm and Palmary ready. And on the Oilers side, they need depth on offense. Like, Yamamoto, for example, this year is struggling, especially, I think, recently, just because the Oilers have placed McDavid and Draisaitl on the same line, just to polarize every team in the league, or in the North Division, anyway. And so that kind of leaves the other winners out to lunch. None of them are as good without McDavid or Draisaitl on their line. Like, let's face it. So if I'm the Oilers, like, in the playoffs, they're probably going to have McDavid and Draisaitl on separate lines, because if a team figure out a way to shut down McDavid and Draisaitl, and I guess Yamamoto's playing on that line, so there's not really an excuse for him not playing well. If you figure out how to shut down that line, the Oilers are going to be swept. Like, McDavid and Draisaitl run that team. But if you're the Oilers, you go after Darcy Kemper. You do. He's kind of another guy. He's not really on my trade bait list or anything. But, my gosh, if you're the Oilers, you're going after Kemper. He's a good goalie who's proven that he can be a good starter. Sometimes a fantastic starter in Arizona. But he's not one of those bell cow starters, which are like play 60 games out of an 82-game season or anything. Like Freddie Anderson and Carey Price are bell cow starters, for an example. He's more of I'm going to play 50 games. Koskinen or Smith can play 30. Probably Koskinen. So it's like, you know, you go to Arizona, you offer like Mike Smith, Oscar Klefbom maybe or something, and you get Darcy Kemper, and then you have a starter for the playoffs, you're basically set. Darcy, just adding a good goalie to the Oilers, I feel like could add an extra round to their potential. Like, instead of max, they're going to get second round, they're going to get max conference finals, you know? Or like, beyond that, because you never know with McDavid Draisaitl, and maybe Yamamoto turns it on. And Nuge, you can never count him out. And he's not on the trade block, by the way. I highly doubt that, because Oilers are contending. I'm sure the Oilers plan to sign him. So, yeah, he's on an expiring deal, but I don't think he's going to get traded. And Landeskog, Gabriel Landeskog in Colorado, same thing. Just, you know, he's the captain of Colorado, too. He's their heart and soul guy. So, I see no reason why Unless Colorado can't just can't figure out an extension just because the cap and having to sign McCarr. Unless they can't do that, then I see no reason why he won't be signed. Last guy I want to talk about is Taylor Hall out of Buffalo. So I talked about Buffalo earlier. I mentioned that you want to build them up from the foundation. Under no circumstances should Buffalo re-sign Hall. It just hasn't worked out there. So let's talk about where he could go. Oh my goodness. Josiah would love this. But Edmonton? Edmonton's a good team. Again, they need some scoring depth. Oh my goodness. Hall and McDavid on a line together. That would be insane. Hall would be like 100-point guy maybe in a full year because I feel like Hall needs to be not the main guy. Like, he can't be the main guy. It's with exception to his Hart Trophy winning year in New Jersey. I don't think he can be that I'm gonna carry this team on my back kind of guy. And in Edmonton, he sure will not have to do that. Not with McDavid and Draisaitl on his team. So I feel like he'd be a good fit there. He could play with Hall or Draisaitl and elevate that line, and then that power play would be absolutely insane. Like, can you imagine McDavid, Draisaitl, Hall, and Barrie on a power play together with Yamamoto? Oh, okay. Some teams would have some issues with that. You know, like, I just feel like he'd be he'd be a good fit there. He's talked about how he loved Edmonton when he was there, even though Edmonton sucked. So I feel like he'd love them a lot more now that they're actually good. I don't know. It's just kind of a thought. I don't know. Like, so many teams could use a scoring boost, but to me, it has to be a team where he's not the leader. Like Pittsburgh. Like, I thought about Pittsburgh for a while, and I actually really like the Pittsburgh idea. Again, same thing as Edmonton. He's not going to be the main man. Not with Crosby and Malkin on that team. You know? But he could elevate one of their lines, really elevate the Penguins, who are one of the best teams in the league looking for a cup this year. Maybe they go for it again. Like, why not go for it this year when the Penguins are so good? Why would you start a rebuild now? It doesn't make any sense. I don't think they're going to start a rebuild as long as Crosby and Malkin are still good or still relevant. So I see no reason why they couldn't go out and get Hall. They don't have a lot of prospects to give Buffalo, and they don't have a lot of picks either. But I think what Buffalo wants to look for now, more than prospects and picks, is a decent roster player. And Pittsburgh has plenty of those. Like, they could start, like, maybe Brian Rust, you know, like, a guy like that, just trying to think of guys. There aren't too many, so it would be a hard trade, but if Pittsburgh could get it done, that'd be insane. And then one more guy I just thought of to talk about is Erik Staal, also in Buffalo. So many teams could use a guy like this. Like, you don't really want to put him on a Canadian team just because 2-week quarantine would be hard on him. I think he'd really struggle for the rest of the year. Look at Pierre-Luc Dubois in Winnipeg right now. That quarantine was hard enough on him, and he's 12 years younger. So I just feel like you don't really want to do that, but there's still plenty of American teams. Like, Boston's looking for a good third-line center, I believe, and Boston's a playoff contender. Staal has Stanley Cup experience. Boston doesn't really need that in particular, but, like, maybe he goes to, like, Carolina. Like, Erik and Jordan Staal together. Erik goes back to Carolina, brings that cup experience back. Carolina's relevant again. I actually really like this. I don't know, like, do they need him at center? Maybe, maybe not. But I see no reason why Carolina couldn't try to get him for, like, cheap. They're loaded on D prospects. Like, Bean, maybe not giving up Bean. That may be a bit much just for Staal. But, like, Bean and Fleury, one of those two guys is not playing at all times. And both of them should be NHL regulars by now. Like, both of them were probably ready for the NHL, like, 2 years ago. And one of them is still not playing in the NHL consistently. Both of them aren't playing in the NHL consistently. So, Carolina, I feel like, needs to trade one of those guys. And bringing Erik Staal back, it would generate more people to watch them. And it could help bolster them with some Stanley Cup experience, too. I actually really like this. But anyway, guys, I'm going to call it a podcast now. 40 minutes recording time. Not bad. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and enjoyed listening to me kind of ramble. I have to work on that. But anyway, bye-bye, guys.